Headlines and our key focus. Israeli media has now confirmed that the hostage body that was returned by Hamas has now been identified as that of Eliyahu Churchill Margalit. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office had earlier confirmed that Hamas had handed over the remains of one more hostage to Israel after insisting that it was committed to returning all the dead captives that were still unaccounted for. Meanwhile, Netanyahu's office has stated that Hamas knows where the remaining hostages and their bodies are, and that the group must adhere to US President Donald Trump's 20-point plan. Benjamin Netanyahu's office has also emphasized that Hamas is running out of time in doing so. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Saul Sadka, security analyst and author, joining us from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to all of us on NewsX World. We've gotten confirmation that by Israeli media itself that the body of Eliyahu Churchill Margalit has now been returned. The Hostage Family Forum has now come forth and given further information confirming that Margalit was murdered by Hamas in Kibbutz Nir Oz on 7th October 2023, and then his dead body was taken by Hamas terrorists and was kept in Gaza for 2 years. What is your reaction to this information? And because it's quite spine-chilling.
Yes, it's shocking. We are dealing with people here who have absolutely no limits of behavior that usual humans respect, to the extent that they have been motivated by years of deals of this kind to literally kill people and steal their bodies and then try to blackmail their families to get their bodies back, because they know that in Jewish tradition, having a proper burial is extremely important for families, that's what motivates them to steal the bodies. And unfortunately, one of the side effects of this deal, which has brought closure to another family today, is that that message is sent out even harder to everyone in the world, that if you steal the bodies of Israelis or Jewish people, you might be able to get something out of that. So while this is a fabulous day, and hopefully over the next week or so, the remaining, I think it's 17 bodies will be returned and put a complete full stop to this 2-year calamity. We have to remember, at the same time, it's critical to ensure this can never happen again. And it's not clear exactly how you send a message to future potential body snatchers that this will no longer work. We will have to see how that plays out.
Indeed, and I'd like to also point out something that happened just a few days back earlier when the first set of 4 bodies were returned. We learned that the IDF had informed that one of the 4 bodies that was returned by Hamas to Israel, it did not match that of the hostages. And Israel has then emphasized that Hamas is required to make all the necessary efforts to return the dead hostages. Hamas, in the meantime, claims that it requires heavy equipment in order to unearth the bodies that are in tunnels. Can these claims really be taken at face value, considering what we've seen take place just 2 days ago with the bodies not really matching?
Yeah, the fact that they returned a body that was not the correct body, that's not the first time that happened. The same was done about a year ago when other previous bodies were released, including the body of Shiri Bibas was returned. It was someone else entirely. It could be this was accidental, but most likely it isn't. Most likely it is part of a sick psychological warfare game. However, psychological warfare only works so well if you don't have any actual tools to fight your enemy. And Hamas no longer really has any significant leverage against Israel. And so their end is nigh, except to the extent that they control the population of Gaza. There are nearly 2 million people living in the Gaza Strip at the moment in about 40% of its former area, mostly not in their original homes, because most of the domiciles in Gaza are destroyed. As a result, we have to hope that those people are able to overthrow the remnants of Hamas. Because it has to be said that the Israeli public no longer are particularly motivated to have their sons go into what is now a foreign territory to get rid of a jihadist group that no longer poses a threat to them in the short term or even the medium term. As long as Israel maintains the perimeter and prevents them from rearming, which Israel can easily do, Hamas no longer presents a threat to Israelis. So Israelis no longer have any kind of motivation to attack Hamas. And even that applies across the spectrum on the left and the right for their own reasons. The left in Israel are not keen under any circumstances for the army to continue the war. And the right, on the other hand, the more Machiavellian side of the right would say, well, it's quite useful, seeing as Hamas are no longer posing a threat to us personally, it's quite useful to have them there controlling the population. Otherwise, we would have to. So there's no more motivation in Israel, no appetite really, except among very small groups, to continue the war against Hamas. As far as Israel is concerned, its war goals are as good as complete once the bodies have been completely returned. And so the remaining bodies, once they come back, it's going to be very difficult for the Gazans to overthrow the people, but that's what's going to have to happen because the IDF are not going to do it. And no foreign or Arab army is going to come there and disarm them. And if Hamas does not disarm, the net effect will only be a negative to the Gazans. It's really a Gazan people's problem if Hamas is still there, because it means no redevelopment money, no major rebuilding can even begin while they're still there.
My question is, stay on with us as we're tracking some other developments on the broadcast. We're now learning that U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, senior advisor to Donald Trump, and his son-in-law as well, they've discussed their reaction to Israel's strike on Hamas's leadership in Qatar on the 9th of September. Now, Witkoff has revealed that he and Kushner both felt a little bit betrayed by the Israeli action, which targeted Hamas leaders in Doha. Qatar, of course, we know is a key mediator in the negotiations. The strike, it did fail to kill any senior Hamas figures, but it did result in the deaths of lower-level Hamas members and a Qatari guard. It had quite a meta-sizing effect, is what both Witkoff and Kushner have had to say on the negotiations. Kushner, meanwhile, has noted that this action led President Trump to take a stronger stance, realizing that this was not in the interest of long-term peace. Trump has also earlier expressed his frustration, calling the strike a disappointment and stating that he had not been given any meaningful warning in advance. Now, in response to the incident itself, Trump has reiterated his commitment to defending Qatar in the event of future attacks and ensuring that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued an apology earlier to Qatar from the Oval Office. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Saul Satka. Interesting statements coming in from Witkoff and Kushner. What do you make of this rhetoric?
The thing to remember, first of all, in geopolitics is don't pay attention to what people say, pay attention to what they do. And if you look, approximately 4 or 5 days before the Israeli attack on Qatar, there were statements coming out directly from the American administration, from, in particular, Bono, who was the hostage negotiator, and also Rubio, who became openly critical and increasingly critical of Qatar. And that fits with a piece of knowledge that Israel was not particularly open about broadcasting, but was widely known in Israeli circles here, that it was Qatar who, for a while, have been telling Hamas what to do and how to negotiate. And seeing as that Hamas were not releasing the hostages, it was quite clear that it was Qatar that was telling them that they should hold out for a better deal. And that's been going on for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the entire attack was planned out of hotels in Qatar. So Qatar is not a neutral player as far as Israel is concerned. They were Hamas's primary patron, their primary sponsor. So, but like I said, pay not attention to what these people are currently saying. Pay attention to what they did. And what they did was a couple of days before the attack, they started warning Qatar that their time as a useful intermediary was coming to an end, and implying quite clearly, because Qatar cannot function. Qatar has a population of 300,000 people, of which only about half at any one time live in the country, particularly in the summer, because it's extremely hot. It can be 50 degrees. And the people there are very wealthy, those 300,000 people, and they don't stay there if they don't have to in the summer. In addition to that, they have about 2 million people who live among them, most of them from the Indian subcontinent,
Yes.
particularly from India, from Sri Lanka, but also from Southeast Asia, who live there mostly in terrible conditions and earning very, very low wages compared to what the Qataris earn. The people there are not happy, and the Qatari government is extremely fragile. They don't have any local Qataris who can protect their tiny state from their very large and powerful neighbors to the south and the north, to wit, Iran and Saudi Arabia. So they need to find ways, they need to make alliances to protect themselves. Their paranoia is that at some point in the future, they're going to be attacked not by Israel, but by Saudi or by Iran. And that's the game they've been playing for years. So 4 days after that happened, it was the Israeli strike. The Israeli strike came out of the blue for Qatar, but I assure you there is no way that the attack happened approximately 10 miles from the largest American base in the Middle East. There's no way. Netanyahu, say what you like about him, is quite conservative, that he would have approved a kinetic attack 10 miles from the base of their only important ally, the USA. In other words, the Americans were definitely warned about it. And you could see immediately afterwards, though, and not just because the strike was technically unsuccessful, the Americans tried to pretend like they didn't know about it and it was a surprise, but I can assure you they were informed and they approved of it. And the reason they approved of it is because they wanted to get a message to Qatar, a very firm message, because apparently the verbal message had not got through to the relevant levels in Qatar. The people in Qatar, some of them were not convinced, perhaps some were convinced, and others weren't. There might have been infighting going on in Qatar about whether the time had come to finally pressure Hamas properly or not. And that message finally got through to them. The United States was saying to them, while they openly, publicly said, no, don't worry, we didn't approve it, it surprised us, we didn't have enough warning. In reality, they certainly did. And everything else was face-saving. Remember, face and honor is very important in the Middle East. And then we can see that a few weeks later, when the deal finally came, it came as part of it, a Netanyahu apology over the phone, and it was very theatrical, and pictures were released of Netanyahu holding the phone and speaking to the Qatari Prime Minister and apologizing, even though it clearly wasn't a very heartfelt apology, because the text was later released.
Yes.
That's all theater, and it was all critical to actually getting the deal done. If that strike had happened, I'm pretty sure that we wouldn't be talking now with all the hostages released. Even though the strike failed at eliminating those 5 Hamas leaders who were there, it was a critical part in bringing an end to the war.
Indeed, a quick follow-up to what you've pointed out in your answer. You have pointed out to the difference between what's happening behind the scenes versus the public theatrics that we've witnessed. You've also pointed out that the Al Udeid Air Base is the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, in Qatar. And now we see these statements being made after the ceasefire deal is already in effect. That's not all. You also say, look at what the United States is doing. There's going to be a Qatari military training facility at the Mountain Home Air Force Base in southwestern Idaho. Is all of this then the statements that we're seeing, the training facility that the US is going to provide Qatar on US soil itself? Is this all, and the public theatrics, is this all just then the US trying to placate the Qataris and secure its own strategic interests in the Middle East?
Yes, exactly like you said. And of course, the pact that Trump signed as an executive order to guarantee protection of Qatar is merely that. It's just a executive order. It can be cancelled by the current US president or a future US president at a moment's notice. And any pact that can be cancelled unilaterally without consequences is really not worth the paper it's written on. So, nevertheless, it makes Qatar feel happy. It got Qatar to the table. And Qatar will probably want to have that formalized at some point.
All right.
But my guess is that Qatar realized Qatar's game in the Middle East for the past 25 years has been to present itself as a neutral broker between what they present on the one hand as their crazy jihadi people and the anti-jihadis. And they're saying they're neutral. And they're saying we're the good cop, and those crazy people, they're the bad cop. And so if you want to control the bad cop, come to us and we'll help you. Of course, they have been building up the bad cop, and the bad cop is critical to their game. And their bad cops in the Middle East have recently been somewhat denuded. Their main bad cop that they were using to wield soft power was none other than the Iranian nuclear program. Of course, nobody wants Iranian nukes less than Qatar, because Qatar would be the first to go. They didn't want Iranian nukes, but they wanted the threat of Iranian nukes to force other people to come begging to them, please help us, Qatar, deal with the Iranians. And now Hamas, which was another one of their levers, has also been effectively reduced to a non-threat. So they are in trouble. Their game of good cop, bad cop with jihadis is up. So they are trying now to make friends. And we'll see how that plays out. They've already reduced the output and the tone of the invective that comes out of their various propaganda outlets like Al Jazeera.
Yes.
That's already been toned down. And we'll see how this plays out. It could well be that in a year or so we will be talking and Qatar and Israel would be officially great friends, and all the nasty stuff that's been said from one side to the other put behind us. We'll see. Time will tell.
Requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some further updates from the Middle East itself.